Hello, Bill Hansbury here from Playberry Laser Tier 1 2. Just want to have a little chat with you about how has assessing reading changed in this science of reading era, and why has it changed? Because if you're perhaps moving away from running records or three queuing based approaches and you're using other assessments, an obvious question to ask is why? Why are we doing this? What's changed? A lot of people will say, I get really good information from running records and that type of thing. Well, I just want to take you through this and explain the best I can in my own clumsy way why we are in this new phase of assessment. So here we go. There's a word. Now, the word just popped for you. It's pony. There it was, bang, I put it up on screen and your brain instantly said to you, pony. And if it didn't, let's just go again. So here we go. Here comes a word, but bang, there it is. Now, that word just popped off the screen for you. Your brain gave you a mental pronunciation and the meaning of that word within about a fifth of a second. The word just popped for you when I put it on screen. No effort, no decoding. Now, pony is one of about probably roughly 50,000 words that you recognise like this when you see them in print. And we know that literate adults have between, literate adults have between 30 and 70,000 of these words that just pop for them. We loosely call them sight words in our space, but yeah, most of us proficient readers, 30 to 70,000 of these words that just pop. Just like pony popped for you. Now I'm going to put some more words up on the screen, and you probably already have these words stored as sight words as well, just like pony. But as these words come up, I want you to do something which is really not intuitive. I want you to try not to say the word mentally to yourself, but I want you to be able to say aloud or in your own brain what the colour is. So again, you're going to see 6 words come up. I don't want your brain to tell you what the word is. I want your brain to try and tell you what the colour of the word is. Here we go. So that was really easy, wasn't it? You went black, blue, red, green, purple, orange. Oh, actually, I didn't find that all that easy. As those words came up, my brain just went union, onion, horse, house, sad, and said. And I tell you what, my brain did that a whole lot easier than it did telling me what the colour was. Isn't that? That's something weird, isn't it? Now, anyway, what's going on there? Well, your brain actually found it hard to name the colour that those words were in because the first thing your brain processed was the actual word. In fact, it's been proven over and over again in cognitive psychology that it is actually impossible to suppress your brain giving you that word's pronunciation. So when you saw union, your brain went union, told you what it was. But naming the colour took some mental effort, didn't it? It actually slowed you down. When I said don't say the word, say the colour, that was a little bit mentally effortful. Now, this type of thing is called a Stroop test, and researchers have used it to prove that the processing of words that are already stored in your sight word bank is fast and automatic, and it's impossible not to do. Like pony before, those words just jump off the page without any effort. Now, you may have already noticed that I deliberately chose look-alike words. These are words that are commonly confused in reading and spelling by kids who are trying to maybe identify them from the context or from picture clues. However, you're a proficient reader. You are hardly ever going to make these look-alike errors. I don't think you're ever going to confuse union with onion or horse with house or sad with said. And the fact that proficient readers hardly ever confuse horse with house or sad with said gives us some really important information about what the brain is paying attention to when it stores these words for automatic recognition. It's actually not paying attention to the shape of the word or the picture next to it. Your brain has to be paying attention to each of those letters in their particular order, because if it wasn't, Well, if my brain wasn't, I'd be confusing horse and house all the time if I was just going by the general look of the word. Okay, let's keep looking at pony though. So you know that along with those other words, house and horse and said and sad and union and onion, that the word pony is one of those between 30 and 70,000 words that you have stored in your sight word bank. The fancy language for sight word bank is orthographic lexicon. And because they're in that sight word bank or orthographic lexicon, they are instantly recognized by your brain. They come up and you just go, you name it. So how did pony or any of those other words just get in there? How did they get in your brain so they just pop for you? What was the process? And how is it that you will never ever confuse pony with a lookalike word like phony, right? How does this happen? Well, let's look into it. So when you were a little tacker, assuming that you did have sound phonological awareness and you were developing your phonic knowledge, when you were a little one, you would have come across pony for the very first time, probably in a reader. So your eyes are scanning along the line, Bill rode his, and would scream to a halt because at this point you hadn't stored pony. You'd never seen the word pony in print. It was an unfamiliar word to you and it was not yet in your sight word bank. All right, so now we're going to go inside your brain. Now this is going to be sloppy, but you'll get the idea. We're now inside your brain. Okay, a very important banner has come up and it says phonemic awareness. Now, because when you were a little tacker, hopefully, you had nicely developing phonemic awareness. Now, some kids have to work much harder than others to get to this point that they've got nicely developing phonemic awareness, but you had obviously had enough because in your brain, when you struck pony and you didn't know what it was, you already had some nice little mental representations of the sounds or the phonemes that pony's made up of. So if you can imagine me holding up my fingers for finger spelling, your brain had P, O, N, E. Nice, crisp mental representations of those four phonemes that make pony. And you also were building the phonic knowledge. Your brain was starting to map that the letter P stood for that P and the letter O stood for that that phoneme O, and on we go. So you had some phonic knowledge as well. And your brain was able to pull pony apart into P, O, N, E, and the only reason it could store pony is because it was able to think about those sounds P, O, N, E on their own. You saw it in print and things were starting to click over in your brain. And because, yeah, somewhere along the line, like I said, you'd worked out that P makes P and O makes O. Well, in the beginning, kids think it makes O, but, you know, we do teach them about open syllables and they learn that it can make O, and anyway, and so on. Then when you saw these weird letters or this weird word on a page, you started to activate the phonemes in your brain, knowing that P is P and O is O and all that sort of stuff. And you were able to bring in your brain together those four sounds and go, P. Oh, you probably started off by going P, on, P, oni, pon, oh, but then something amazing happened. You got to a close enough pronunciation of P, on, e, P, on, and then your vowel stretched. You might have gone P, on, and then your brain goes, hang on, I think I know what you're trying to do. I think you're trying to say pony. And that's, you might even remember when you were little doing that with words, that you might have got one vowel sound out. You're looking at it and you're going, pony. And all of a sudden, when you got a close enough pronunciation to that word, because of your phonic knowledge and your phonemic awareness, your meaning activator fired, connected, and your brain gave, pony, that's a small horse. So through that process of that first and second and maybe third decode of that word pony, your brain started to do something really, really cool. It started to link the sounds to the letters you saw on the page to what that word represents. And then on you went. Now, So you can see up in the top left, we've got orthographic mapping and we've got Airy. Now, Linnea Airy was kind of first coming up with this theory that I'm probably pretty badly explaining to you, but in the 1980s, Linnea Airy came up with this. So let's just look at it again. The little reader knew the letter P and O and N and Y. They could spot them in the alphabet, they could say their names, and they knew some of their sounds. And with those initial decodes, they were starting to just all bond together and stick together. So after a few turns, when we saw P-O-N-Y in print, it connected to the sounds in the brain, and that cemented tight. Now, it was Airy that talked about the bonding hypothesis, so you can see why she called it bonding. Letters on the page bonding to the sounds in the head, and then the word coming together and bonding together, so we could just look at it and go, oh, pony. Okay. Now, there's the word in print, bonded in the brain. Oh, and the meaning fires up because we've mentally pronounced the word just well enough for the brain to go, oh, I know what you're trying to say. You're trying to say pony. And this three-way mapping or connection happened. And that, my friends, is what we call orthographic mapping. So then back to you as your little reader, because remember, we're talking about you and remembering you as a little reader and the first time you came across pony. So all you had to do now was read on in that text and see pony a few more times. And the research roughly says for a typically developing reader, not a dyslexic reader, but for a typically developing reader, all you needed to do was go through that same process about 4 to 7 times. And each of those 4 to 7 times, it might have sounded the same. You'd look at the word and you'd sound it out. Pony. And the brain would give it to you like that. And each of those 4 to 7 times, your brain was cementing this connection between the letters on the page in their particular order, the sounds that you had stored in your head, and what it meant. And then that tight bonding between the letters on the page, the sounds in your brain, and the meaning in your brain made sure that pony got locked into your sight word bank. And that's my really dodgy drawing of a sight word bank. Obviously, it doesn't look like that. But you can see on the roof, sight word bank, 30 to 70,000, the bank of sight words. No word has ever escaped from there because, by the way, once a word gets into your sight word bank, you'll never forget it. You might not read the word pony for 5 or 10 years. And then when you see it in print again, it'll just pop for you. Won't be like if you haven't seen someone you worked with for 5 or 10 years and you see them and you look at them and you go, oh, I know that person. Oh, gee, does their name start with a P? No, you see, that doesn't happen with words that you've orthographically mapped, which kind of tells you that words that you have stored get stored in your brain differently to people's faces and names. And I'll draw your attention back to the picture, and there's that heavy bloke in his black suit out the front going, have you been orthographically mapped? Because no word gets into your sight word bank without being orthographically mapped, and no word is orthographically mapped without a few decodes. Now, just to pick up on what I said about how for dyslexic students, it's not 4 to 7 decodes, it's just many, many more decodes. Kids with dyslexia and other types of reading difficulties just have to go through that decoding process a lot more for a word to end up in their sight word bank. Okay, so what the research has absolutely, unequivocally, and indisputably taught us about what good readers do. We do know that strong readers do store words for instant word recognition by mentally linking that word's sounds, like P, O, N, E, to the letter string or the letter order, how it looks in print, to its meaning. So that's what strong readers do. That's how they put words away. And it's decoding that sets this process in train and ensures that those words or word parts are stored in the brain in the most efficient way so they can be recalled without effort. Now, this is what the research absolutely, unequivocally, and indisputably has taught us about what weak readers do. And this doesn't matter whether they're child weak readers or adult weak readers. What do weak readers do? They guess unknown words. Now, if there are pictures available, they will try to work out what an unknown word is from the picture. Or they will try to work out what the word is from the general gist or the meaning of the text, or what that word is doing syntactically. Is it verbing or nouning? They'll try to use all this other compensatory set of strategies to work out what an unknown word is. And what they end up doing is they try to store unknown words or retrieve them as if they're kind of pictures or the face of an old friend that they haven't seen in a very long time. And in trying to store words this way, they treat words as if the sound structure and the letter order of the word isn't very important, but it is massively important. So what's just arrived on screen is this model that's kind of plagued reading instruction and reading assessment for decades in developed countries. And you're looking at a model called 3-queuing or multi-queuing. And it was once believed that when we come across unknown words, we will kind of draw on three processes to try and work out what that word is. We'll try to work out it from its meaning, semantic cues, what's it doing in that text? What are the words around it saying? Can that give me a clue? Or we'd try to work out what's that job doing? Is it nouning or verbing? And if that didn't work, we would finally call on graphophonic cues, which is basically do the letters and their place give us a bit of a clue. And that has really let us down in reading instruction and reading assessment for decades. This is the reason that we developed countries who have poured massive amounts of money into education have continued to get pretty shabby results with kids reading. Now, I want to talk about a really important person in reading and struggling readers. Her name is Dame Marie Clay. And Marie Clay really was a champion for struggling readers. So Marie Clay in 1963, she was at the Uni of Auckland, ran a study because she was, like all of us, Marie Clay had a heart. She had real worries for these kids that just weren't developing reading on time like their peers. And she really wanted to know what was going on with these kids that were having a hard time learning how to read. So her study involved 100 kids in their first year of school. And she watched these kids really carefully for an entire year. And she wanted to know, and this is a really understandable question, she wanted to know, what do good readers do when they read? And what do poor readers do when they read? And what's the difference? So, without the benefit of fMRI or brain scanning techniques to see what the brain's doing, Marie Clay came to a conclusion that anyone in that era with the same tools that Marie Clay had available to her, she came to the same conclusion any of us would have. That good readers, they look like good problem solvers. They look like they kind of search the text for clues. And she noticed that good readers don't laboriously sound out words. They don't use decoding. Because she was watching kids who had probably already orthographically mapped many of those words that they were reading. So she's watching these kids read who are just instantly recognizing words. And she looked at it and she went, oh, the good readers are not decoding. And she was watching these kids not getting stuck on letters. And she built this idea that these kids were kind of sometimes using letters as little clues, but they looked as though really when they struck a word they didn't know, they were using syntax and context and pictures to get an idea. And she kind of summarized that, well, when they did use letters to give them an idea of what the word's pronunciation might be, she thought it wasn't giving very good clues. Now, this is from Sold a Story by Emily Hanford, this kind of description. So Marie Clay came to the exact same conclusion about what good readers do and what weak readers do that you and I would have if we had been in the same position that she was. So her conclusion: good readers use the letters in words in an incidental way. They kind of just skim the letters to confirm that they're getting the meaning of what they're reading. And it looked like the good readers, their very last resort was to decode. All right. Now, around the same time that Marie Clay was doing this, or a little bit later actually, we had this researcher called Linnea Airy, and Linnea is that lady middle of screen. And during the 80s, she was kind of also very interested in what good readers are doing and what poor readers are doing. And she was coming up with a very, very different hypothesis of what good readers do. And it was Linnea Airy who was kind of proposing this theory that, you actually have to sound out and decode words for them to be stored. And all that stuff I went through before with Pony. So Linnea Airy wrote a paper about this orthographic mapping theory, or her bonding hypothesis. And she sent it along to a chap called Ken Goodman, who was really into 3Qing. Ken Goodman and Marie Clay's theories really agreed with each other about what good readers do. They use this 3Qing or multi-queuing, and they don't much pay attention to sounds and letters. And Ken Goodman, understandably, wasn't very happy with Linnea Airy's theories and kind of dismissed them straight off the bat. But it turns out, I'll just go back, it turns out that Linnea was right all along. Now, none of these three people, right or wrong, ever woke up in the morning and said, you know, today I'm going to teach kids how not to store words properly. Everyone was doing their absolute best for kids based on the information they had. It just turns out that after a lot of repeated kind of really good quality experiments, that Linnea was actually right and these other two weren't. It's as simple as that. But no one had any ill intent. So reading scientists have shown that those semantic and syntactic cues or picture cues, they really don't play any part or almost no part in that ability to accurately identify words. And that multi-cueing model, which, you know, what we've been doing with kids for a long time, if you look over on the right of screen, you'll see that big white arrow. Now you're looking at a running record. That kind of errors, that meaning, structure, visual stuff that we thought we need to be looking for when we assess kids, turns out that's pretty faulty. It's based on the wrong type of theories, and even to assess a kid this way and encourage them to try and get words or cues from words from their meaning, their structure, it's actually damaging. So the whole process of even doing a running record on a kid is reinforcing those poor reading habits when we just want them to decode, to sound out when they get a word that they don't know. So yeah, just putting in some green arrows to kind of make the link between what that MSV is about and how it links to this disproven 3Qing model that you see right in the middle of the page. So these days we're pushing our reading assessment right away from this stuff that assesses a kid's ability to use 3Qing to these normed reference assessments. And in Playberry Laser, one that we recommend kids use is Dibbles, right? Now, you're not looking at Dibbles there, by the way. You're looking at the disproven 3Qing stuff. So we're getting right away from this stuff, and the assessments we're using these days are actually much, much better. Teachers using them find they are far quicker, and they give us far better diagnostic information. We're trying to get away from this stuff here. So, you know, back to our reader where the kid reads along and they get to a word. Bill rode his, and the kid says, Bill rode his horse beside the creek. Because of course, the student was looking at it and they go horse, and the teacher would go, under the old 3Qing method, the teacher would go, oh, no, that's not horse. And the student would look confused. And the teacher would go, well, the teacher couldn't say, look at the picture, because that looks like a horse to me, not a pony. So the student under this 3Qing would be really confused if the teacher said, look at the picture, because that wouldn't help the kid get from horse to pony. So the student would just go, and then maybe would get horse. And if they did, maybe would get pony if they knew what a pony is. But it flummoxed most kids, and it really got them into this guessy, panicky way of reading. Now, you're sitting there going, well, I know lots of kids who learn to read in this 3Qing kind of method. Well, you're not wrong. Some kids did. What we didn't realise is underneath the bonnet or underneath the hood, which means inside their brain, even though we thought they were storing words by paying attention to their semantic and syntactic cues or the pictures, what they were actually doing was sounding out. They were decoding that word mentally, and because they were decoding that word mentally and doing this stuff that we talked about before right back here, because this was going on in their brain, they were storing those words properly. We just didn't know that's how they were storing those words. So, folks, this isn't an advert for Dibbles, by the way, but like I said, Playberry Laser Schools, we mandate that they use Dibbles and other evidence-based, normed, controlled kind of assessments for reading. And no longer should anyone be using these kind of inside program assessments. So thanks for tuning in as I kind of explained to you why, or tried to explain why we assess reading in a completely different way and what that's got to do with how kids actually store words. Thanks so much.